So this is a halfway review whereby I'm going to talk about the first 7 episodes of this series, and as I watch it I will record my thoughts. I hope this is something which you guys can follow. I put a lot of work into this. I try to do a decent analysis and also keep my thoughts as genuine and as raw as possible. So this is a Tower of God halfway point review. Before I begin the episodic breakdowns from episode 1 to 7, let me just quickly say, when it started off with "what do you desire," the first line of the whole series, that's what hooked me. Now, what do I mean? Well, as soon as those words were uttered, I instantly scoffed and said to myself, well, here we go. Little did I know that I would come to regret such a scoff, nor did I understand how impactful that question would become as the story progressed. Look, throughout the first couple of episodes, I learned gradually that this is not a simple bog standard cliche story I thought it'd be. They introduce and build complexity quite rapidly without it seeming overwhelming, but at the same time it is somewhat overwhelming. Each time something new is introduced or something that makes me ask a question such as, huh? What? Why? How? There's enough space between those trains of thought for me to slowly progress and digest the information without feeling derailed by my own thoughts or suffer from information overload. Asking a question for the opening line of the episode, "What do you desire?" whilst given possible answers to that question in pairs, whilst montaging characters again in pairs simultaneously, gave me this subliminal pretense that these are the quirks and rationales associated with these characters who are being montaged at that time. It got me looking forward to seeing the plethora of characters that we are yet to be introduced to and what each will bring to the show. So anyway, let's begin with the episodic breakdowns, and I hope you enjoy. Make sure you subscribe and turn on that notification bell. If you want to see more Tower of God, let me know. Episode 1 had a lot of information, especially since the episode lengths are a little longer than usual. The focus of this episode was Bam's introduction to the tower. We get to learn alongside Bam about the tower, what it is, who are these mysterious characters, and what on earth could be at the top. We are initially introduced to another character, Rachel, who seems to be the main driving force for Bam to continue to climb the tower moving forward. Now, Rachel, despite her entering before Bam and Bam following her, it kind of epitomizes the story, as I like it how despite Bam entering the tower for perhaps a very less grand reason, whereas Rachel wants to see the stars, which is something they've been devoid of in this new world, in this mysterious world that we've come to learn and we will learn, Bam's reasons is quite not as grandiose, and that's the beauty of the tower. Whatever your dream is, you will find it, and Rachel's dream is to see the stars, whereas Bam's dream is to just make sure Rachel's happy. And you know what? That's kind of poetic almost, but equally confusing. The narrator says, this is the story of Rachel, a girl who climbed the tower so she could see the stars, and Bam, a boy who needed nothing but her. I'll be honest with you, I don't like retrospective stories, but I'll give this one a go. One of the things that kind of confused me from that narration and the initial start of the episode was Bam chasing after Rachel, and it kind of felt that Rachel's the main character, and I expect her to be the main character, but it does seem that Bam is the main character, so maybe they're gonna flip that later on, I don't know. Well, the episode starts off properly with Bam taking the floor test, where you get a glimpse of his character when he fearlessly plunged into the mouth of the steel eel. This was a nice introduction as we were given glimpses and an action sequence from the get-go, and glimpses of Bam's character and how he is and how he kind of operates, although we know nothing about him apart from the fact that he wants to protect this girl called Rachel, or he wants to find this girl called Rachel. During this, we were also introduced to Princess Yuri of Jahad and her lackey. I don't know the name from the top of my head, but she was quite a fiery, interesting character, and she's the one who lent Bam the Black March, which is some little blade, essentially the means, the tools to beat this steel eel. But how he beat it was quite interesting, because he was able to unlock or contact this spirit that was trapped or that resides within the march, the Black March, and it's quite funny as well. She said, "Oh, I only talk to you because you're a cute boy." Well then, let's see how these dynamics play out throughout the series and throughout the episodes in general. And I think that instead of him unlocking the spirit, it was him igniting the blade. Just the way he went about used it, it seems that the blade hasn't been properly used in a long time. time, judging by the reaction of the other characters, it does seem to be a very significant feat that Bam was able to even utilize this blade. So let's see how that plays out in the future. Also, Yuri sounds and looks very interesting. She must be integral to the story, obviously, because Bam has her weapon. So that's one plot thread that they've weaved in alongside him chasing Rachel. That's kind of funny, isn't it? He is chasing Rachel whilst now someone else is chasing him. Are they trying to mirror this? Is this going to be a theme that we see quite often throughout the series as we move forward? We'll see. Once Bam enters the tower, he finds himself in the midst of a battle royal where he must find and fend off all of the enemies until at least half of them remain. Here we get introduced to two very interesting characters. Khun, this calm, collected, mysterious pretty boy, and Rak, a battle-hungry alligator who is out to hunt all turtles. After watching this episode, I can safely say that honestly I'm hooked, because the way that it utilized the mystery and made me dive into this action, it was very fast paced, and at the same time it's just the right amount of pace for me to be fully invested, and that's something I appreciate. I got a lot of questions, I got a lot of mysteries running through my head, and that's a good thing, because I really want to see the next episode and I want to see how this plays out. Episode 2 was just as impactful as episode 1. We continue on with the floor test as we get a first look and a glimpse to the characters of Rak and Khun. Khun helps Bam as Rak attempts to hunt him, because in his own words, he is his prey. Khun seems like a nice enough guy, but it's clear that he has hidden agendas and is certainly keeping a few, if not a lot, of secrets away from everyone else. The majority of the first part of the episode is seeing the relationship between Khun and Bam spark. It reminds me of Hunter x Hunter and the relationship between Killua and Gon. To be honest, it's a bit too close to Hunter x Hunter. Khun looks like Killua, if anything. I do love seeing how Khun, someone who comes across as deceitful and conniving, get drawn into Bam, who is this pure and innocent soul, and how this interaction produces small changes in Khun from what I've seen so far, and it brings joy to Bam. It's weird because Bam is like a newborn, he doesn't know anything, and that's just confusing. I got so many questions. Who the hell is Bam? Who on earth is Bam? And I don't want this naivety and this innocence to emulate from Bam throughout the series, because if he's too naive, if he's too innocent, if he's too trusting, it kind of gets a bit boring. It's like been there, done that with other series. I'm hoping for something a little different, but let's see what dynamics are introduced to see how that changes, so it's not the same cookie cutter format that we've seen in various other shows. And then there's Rak. Rak is he's simply great. Honestly, he's so fun to watch, and perhaps how I would best describe him would be the fact that reason and logic are only secondary to his pursuit of strong opponents and self-development. I was glad that these three ended up as the trio by the end of the first phase of the test, and it made me laugh at how it was done. Poor Rak. It seems like Khun just outsmarted him. You're destined to play main role in anime, Rak. I'm sorry, mate, you can't be a secondary fodder, and I hope that is the case as we move forward. We were also introduced to some supporting characters during the test also. Somewhere else on the floor, we get to see Anak and Hats go at it in spectacular fashion. They go head to head in an epic clash, giving them the best introduction in the show. Also, there's this guy, this somewhat martial arts expert Bruce Lee wannabe tracksuit guy. I guess these three ending up together and forming a team, it gives a dynamic which will be very interesting, and I'm getting a lot of Naruto vibes, but I'll probably expand on that as we get more episodes. And you know what, I do like the whole team format, so let's just see how they work together. And it may seem like that three might become the main adversary for our current main protagonist team, which is Khun, Bam and Rak. In the next part of the stage, we meet the test administrator, Leroro. He sounds amazing, by the way, who is giving me very strong Hisoka vibes. The test he administers emphasizes another crucial part of the tower that is in Tower of God, luck. luck. Luck is very important. The regulars have been born with a very high enough Shinsu resistance to pass through a barrier of high density Shinsu. Shinsu is like the Nen equivalent, or the Ki equivalent, or the chakra equivalent in this world. It was quite sad to see how some regulars who devoted their entire lives in preparation to climb the tower, they stopped only at the first hurdle due to their own bad luck. It's quite a harsh parallel to real life, where sometimes things are out of your control, and how the luck you are born with helps contribute to your achievements. Where you're born, how you're born, and whom you're born to plays a very important factor as well in this world. A lesson made painfully clear to the amount of regulars who just failed it. And during all this, while we saw so much despair and all these characters failing, one character really did stand out for me, and that is this martial arts Bruce Lee tracksuit guy, Shibisu. Through sheer perseverance, effort and attitude, he manages to pass through the barrier, even inspiring another to do the same in a different anime. With this can-do attitude and amazing martial arts, I assume he knows martial arts, I'm sure he would make a great main character, a great, he has enough of a template to really grow as a character so we can be invested in him. And it does seem to be the case where a lot of these side characters, or these characters who are outside of the protagonist circle or who are not the protagonist, will give us a lot of room to really see the growth and character progression, whereas Bam has his own journey. I think we're going to compare a lot of journeys together throughout the series. As for our actual main character, Bam, the feeling he has been giving off since the first episode was that he's got some immense hidden strength, and that's pretty much been verified to be true. When initially the Shinsu barrier was erected, all regulars, and they were pushed back due to the immense density from one another, that didn't affect Bam. He was the only person to remain unaffected by the massive amounts of Shinsu, and more than he's aware of how amazing that feat was. And that's interesting. He's very oblivious to not only himself, he's not very self-aware it seems, but he's just oblivious to everything else. Again, a very naive character. He's an embryo it seems. He doesn't know really how the world works, and that might just be the best vehicle for us to understand how the world works through him. It was played off as a mistake on Leroro's part, but you know what? When Leroro says a monster has arrived, you know what? I think that was the best line of the whole episode itself. And the best part, the monster himself hasn't even realized that he's a monster. While the other regulars were taking the test, Bam was able to have a conversation with Leroro. We get to learn that one of the reasons why people are afraid of irregulars is that all previous irregulars who had entered the tower were amazingly strong people. Perhaps this foreshadows for what is to come for Bam. Another thing is, Leroro pretty much said that he's already climbed the tower. So these test administrators, these rankers have already climbed the tower, and he allows Bam to ask him any question, and Bam pretty much doesn't ask what he should. He's quite boring, and that really does catch not only our interest but Leroro's interest as well. A very strong episode, a very interesting one at that as well. The third episode begins with a brief flashback from Khun's past, giving us a glimpse of some of the turmoil he went through enough as a child where it scarred him quite severely. Khun Aguero and his family were exiled due to losing the race to produce a Princess of Jahal, highlighting some of the harsh realities of life inside the tower. Khun's sister was not chosen, losing to a character called Maria. Clearly something major had happened during this incident, as the other characters were alluding to a betrayal or betrayals by and to Khun, but yet the flashback ended with strong words from his mother, which inspired his cold, calculated demeanor, from which he seems to remember fondly. Maria seems to be a key character from Khun's past, and I look forward to finding out more. This entire flashback was done so beautifully, from how the rain and the noise slowed down when we hear the words "My Aguero," to how the color grading got a lot brighter once Khun opened his eyes. He is in a better place now. He sees more clearly. The rest of the first half of the episode focuses on the next test, one which emphasizes faith. The dynamic our tremendous trio seemed a little imbalanced, with Khun seeming more superior than the other two. So this test came as a perfect and at a perfect time. It managed to highlight perhaps the biggest weakness that Khun has: lack of faith. This was foreshadowed in his flashback where his mother said, cover your ears, close your heart and find the best path. So it's no wonder why Khun turned out the way he did. This is where our super awesome alligator comes in, an idiot with unbridled confidence in himself. Now, having faith is one thing, but having the courage to follow through is another, and Rak has bucket loads as well as Bam. Also, we get a comment about the weight of Khun's bag from the instant coffee addict of a test administrator, so I guess I'm going to be keeping an eye out for that. What's in his bag? Is it a weapon? How does it work? The latter part of the episode contains a bonus test, which is essentially a mini tournament arc, where the winners get to proceed to the next floor without even completing the remaining test. Another mysterious group joins the mini tournament from a different testing area, with a certain character looking mightily familiar. Perhaps Bam might achieve his goal of finding Rachel, because that girl sure does look like Rachel. Personally, it would be nice to see everything from Rachel's perspective and her journey so far, because we know that she's entered the tower beforehand, but what has she done? Will we get a flashback? Will we see, when we finally get introduced to her, will we see more and more about her? I don't know. The tournament is called the Crown Game and is an oversimplified version of there's 5 rounds and the team with the crown at the end, they win. Now, I've seen some moments of action so far, but watching this terrifying green lizard that is Anak wreak havoc was amazing. It was amazing to see, even more so due to how sharp and dynamic the animation was. The animation and just the way the art is placed allows the animation to come across very fluid. It's very, very well done. And honestly, with the colors and how vibrant it is, damn, I wonder how consistent they can be, because in the last few episodes it's been consistently amazing. Now, this green lizard, she's interesting. I love the detail that he went into the fight scene, all the way down to when Hats moved his swords out of the way so Shibisu doesn't trip over them. It's just nice attention to detail. And Bam finally notices that this Rachel looking figure, which I think is it has to be Rachel surely. And my bets are, you know what? Bam is going to hit the buzzer next round. Come on, he needs to get in. He's really curious. This episode was good. It was very action-packed, and again, it kind of gave us a lot. All these characters that we are being introduced to, it's a lot to digest, but I'm liking it so far. This episode starts off with the action that we've all been waiting for all week, from the ending of episode 3. During the next round, we learn that Hats is pretty damn strong, enough to solo fodder quite easily, a trait all super strong characters tend to share. But it turns out that Shibisu is the literal embodiment of Bruce Lee, sound effects and all included. During this round, there were 2 standout moments. The first relates to this burrito boy, this I don't know what he is, in a sleeping bag. I like how this show is starting off to introduce very complicated battle strategies rather than stick to just my sword is bigger than yours and this determines who wins the fight. Though this burrito guy looks kind of weird on the outside, but he's able to come up with a pretty damn good strategy to winning the whole game itself. And to top it all off, he made it quite the flashy first attack. What was that? Up until this point, we have only seen one instance of Shinsu being used, and that was by a ranker. It's nice to see that Shinsu control isn't something limited to the strongest or the cream of the crop, the absolute strongest characters. So perhaps our boy Bam will be picking up some skills soon. I like how Shinsu is animated. It really does resemble water. It does mean divine water essentially. It can be soft and fluid like when Leroro used it, or it can be rapid and powerful and turbulent as shown by Lore, that's his name. Despite having come up with a very good strategy and being quite powerful himself, he still manages to lose. That brings me to the second standout moment of the episode, ignition. Very few scenes in very few anime are able to instill and create a mood so strong that in an instant it messes with the viewer's emotion. The moment it begins, we think of something else. Anak's counterattack or Anak's rage was such a scene. Everything from the doom-inspiring soundtrack to the warped image of Anak as she said ignition sent chills down my spine, and I had, you know what, he had me holding my breath. It was insanely epic. The Tower of God is shaping up to be quite the exciting battle animes I've seen so far, and it's only episode. Lore didn't look too bad as well. He did quite well, and it was quite cool as he was floating and dodging all of Anak's attack. I couldn't help but think how comfortable this setup looks even in the midst of death. He's very snug and warm. A nice way to die, isn't it? During the fight we learn that the weapon Anak is using is similar to the Black March, which is Bam's weapon he got from Yuri. Remember her? Yeah, where the hell is she? I think she'll be making her way to the test floor soon enough, surely. The two weapons ended up resonating, consequentially letting Anak know of the Black March's presence, which led to a confrontation and a bet. I was reminded of the harsh nature of the tower when Anak mentioned that she'll just kill Bam after the tests are concluded if he doesn't accept her bet. With that, the bet being if Bam can win the game, he keeps the Black March. If not, she takes the Black March. Doesn't Yuri get a say in this? Fortunately, Anak and Ko were disqualified since she had left the throne. With the bet accepted and Khun being inspired by Bam's courage in standing up to Anak, we finally have our main trio stepping up to the fight. And from this point onwards, this becomes quite frankly the Khun Aguero show, and I loved every second of it. Now, I mentioned that I liked how Lore introduced more complicated tactics earlier on, but this was nothing compared to Khun. Clearly he's quite strong, he's able to hold his own in combat, but he's so cunning. He is so cunning and a master tactician that puts him a foot above the rest so far, while managing to get the other contestants to battle it out over a fake crown. Bam was made the king, setting themselves up perfectly for the next couple rounds. Even though many epic moments took place, this episode was stolen. It was hijacked by Khun at the very end. I'm just looking forward to Rak getting the ability to demolish some turtles in the next episode. Other than that, I'm interested in finding out who Rachel's teammates are, especially the one with the horns and that devilish smirk, who probably is an instant candidate for best girl, if I might add. Judging by her interaction with Anak, she is a real princess of Jahad, which means Anak is fake, or is that an insult? I don't know. I really don't know. I want to see how this plays out. I can't wait to see what happens in the next episode. But before I conclude this episode, can I just mention how amazing the soundtrack was? It added so much depth to how this story was playing out. The soundtrack that was playing whilst Khun was going about stealing the show was so drastically different to the one which was playing when Anak was going on her supposed rampage. Anak's one inspired dread, and Khun's soundtrack inspired hope. The sound design so far has been second to none, and honestly, so far, these I am talking weird, but these 4 episodes have been amazing. But no, it's been fantastic, absolutely brilliant. The first half of this episode was a continuation of the Khun Aguero show. We also find out that the answer for the mystery of Khun's bag, mentioned previously by the instant coffee addict, turns out wow. It turns out the scheme started long ago. All the way from episode 1, he had hidden several contestants that he had recruited during the first test in his bag. That's quite crazy. His bag must be quite big. Honestly, he's quite genius the more I think about it. And by hiding them in the bag, he said, look, you have to promise us that you have to help us out throughout the series, or when the time comes, we're going to call on you and you sort us out. At the start of the episode, Khun put his hair in a ponytail, and though at first it looked like he was just trying to procure more fangirls by upping his pretty boy status, it was actually a signal for his hidden companions to show themselves and assist him. This reminds me of a famous quote: if a lamp has no significance in the story, it shouldn't be there. Though I don't know who it was that said it, nor when, so who knows if it's actually even a famous quote. But the point is that every little detail counts in your story, and especially so far in Tower of God. It's been doing splendidly so far. Round 4 went by in a breeze without them even needing to fight. Poor Rak. But that meant that we got to see and we get to, heavily anticipate round 5, and it came really damn soon. In round 5, we get the inclusion of the team from the other test area, Rachel's team, which contains what might be perhaps a real Princess of Jahad. Another overpowered team entered as well. The action was pretty good with everyone having their individual battles, and that was nice to see the spotlight given to these characters. But the twist made it a little more interesting. What seemed like a very difficult situation for Bam, Khun and Rak turned out to be a very ideal situation for them, especially to win when Rachel, Endorsey and Red decided to protect Bam instead of going for the crown. Endorsey versus the skin-tight leotard wearing redhead was a fun fight to watch, though Endorsey seemed to be the stronger of the two since she seemed a little bit more comfortable, even throwing out quirky quips here and there. She wasn't really trying, was she? The more I see her, the more her personality comes through, and the more I'm liking her character. She's really damn interesting. Perhaps the best girl contender after Yuri, but then again, we need Yuri to really reintroduce herself back in the story. Where the hell is she? The best fight that took place during all of this is easily Rak's rock, paper, scissors match against rando number 1. I nearly fell off my chair when he said first comes rock, and instead of continuing on to scissors, he just went with rock again. To top it all off, he was done with the game. He decided to end it with a headbutt and a toss. The turtle never stood a chance. The only people not fighting were Bam and Rachel, and that's interesting. Rachel stood guard over Bam as the tension between them built up. Bam doesn't really know, he's not really too sure if that's her or not, and I kind of find that a little stupid. Surely he should be quite convinced. It would be ridiculous if they come out of all of this with Bam not confirming that is indeed Rachel. This episode, all in all, was good, but it didn't have the same flair as the previous episode, and that's what I thought until the final scene of the test. The redhead managed to get past Endorsey due to a mishap and was going straight for Bam, who only had Rachel to protect. At this point, I question why on earth was she standing guard, because she was completely useless, and it was in fact Bam who ended up protecting her by shielding her from a strike. Big mistake, big mistake for Miss Leotard, because Bam, after going unconscious, released Shinsu as such a force and such a scale that it even made the rankers pay attention. This was the first we've seen of Bam's hidden strength. If all the irregulars previously had been monsters, I am sure that Bam will follow suit. It was nice to see Yuri again, and respect for the gamer representation of the team. I notice how he has bluish hair, perhaps a relative to Khun. Her navigator has got his hands full as usual, but it's nice to see how the interactions are always entertaining. After the crown game ended, we see that Bam is still unconscious and that if he doesn't wake up soon, he's gonna be disqualified from the test and fail. It's nice to see Khun by Bam's side. Their bromance is really starting to blossom and develop over the last few episodes, and they have easily become my favorite duo. Bam's strength and Khun's intelligence now seems to be a force to be reckoned with. Who knows? Maybe they'll take on a rank in the future. Who knows? Maybe they'll batter someone. I don't know. Other than that, there was an interesting conversation between Leroro and Yuhan Sunga. What is the point for these tests? We learned that different people have different opinions. There are those that see them as a way of determining whether a regular is worthy of climbing the tower, and there are those who see the test as a way to weed out the most dangerous individuals who may become a threat to Jahad. Who the hell is Jahad? And yeah, threat to Jahad and the tower. This seems to be a setup for something in the future, some sort of manipulation to take place later on, perhaps. I don't know. I don't trust Coffee Guy, man. I just think this is really spooky. The differing opinions of the rankers create a very complicated world in the Tower of God, and it makes things way more interesting. Perhaps there will be multiple factors and factions going forward from this point. Either way, I'm looking forward to finding that out. Now, this episode was a bit weird, but very wonderful. It really was a weird and wonderful episode. It starts off with a flashback of Bam remembering Rachel and Bam both staring upwards as she explains once more how she wants to see the stars of a real night sky. The flashback plays out to the single strum of an acoustic score, which gives it a somewhat eerie, mysterious and hypnotic feel to it. Why? Is Bam so in awe of Rachel that it equates to him being hypnotized? It ends as it goes to black as Bam says, "Rachel, don't go." Perhaps this is something to take note of. All this commentary on Rachel from Bam's perspective, and with this eerie strumming score, I'm doubting the accuracy of his recollection of Rachel more and more as time goes on. And this is supported when Rachel converses with Khun whilst Bam lays there unconscious in the room. Her first words immediately after Bam's flashback were, "Bam was a very lonely boy." She relays the events of episode 1 on where she abandoned Bam. She pretty much said, "I abandoned him," much to the suspicious gaze of Khun, who cuts through the faff and asks her, "Get to the point." This seems to be consistent with his character trait, and it's been cemented in the last few episodes that Khun is a no-nonsense, calculating and very, very intelligent guy. More importantly, it was a smart way to accelerate the narrative by adding layers to a backstory which already seems quite stacked. Wait, what do I mean by that? Well, Khun smelt bullshit, but he allowed her to justify why she shouldn't tell Bam the truth because he relayed an experience of his own past, adding layers to the mystery of Khun and sowing seeds for the mystery of Rachel, all whilst drumming up sympathy for Bam. The poor bloke can't seem to catch a break as he continues to chase after Rachel. This all happened within the first 2 minutes. That all happened in 2 minutes. This series really is truncating quite a lot. They really are compressing a decent amount, and I don't think it's as effective as it's been in the last couple of episodes. I don't know, maybe it's a bit too much, or maybe I'm overthinking things. Let me know down below. What concludes this scene was a very endearing moment between Rak trying to show that he doesn't care about the black turtle's health, but he obviously does. Over the past few episodes, we are seeing how Rak's prey are becoming his respectful comrades. With such a ensemble cast, it may get difficult to highlight characters to an acceptable degree, but this episode was a great showcase on how to achieve just that. There was very little but a lot going on in this episode. The use of smart, snappy flashbacks to reinforce and enforce a current conversation, like how Khun was telling Bam how he's very lucky as wave training begins 2 days after everyone else. All these mini cliffhangers from the previous episode and episodes were addressed to some capacity, and again, the story and episode feels like a forward moving wave. There's a lot of information coming at you fast, very, very fast in this episode. Previous information we knew about is relayed to other characters. Essentially, everyone now knows and truly is on the same playing field in terms of knowledge. Well, so we assume. But the illusion of it all kind of gives the audience the feeling that the characters are being treated with respect from the showrunners. And you know what? Will this last? Are they able to maintain the focus, maintain the other side characters to be highlighted in such a fashion so that we are invested in them and we care about them? And Nak's team find out about the Black March and that the Black March only talks to men. Sorry, handsome men. Just that short insert allows for a great comedic moment. We find out about the lore of the Princess of Jahad, why Anak is always angry, the 5 basic positions. With these supposed answers, more mysteries are planted to the viewers. I like that Bam doesn't for a moment buy that girl is not Rachel, but I also like the fact that Khun is doing everything in his power to ensure that Rachel is not a hindrance to Bam. He's using everything. He's using various avenues to which he's deploying his lies and mind games to distract Bam from his single-minded drive for Rachel. Is genius. I think this is telling of a greater story that is going to unfold in the episodes to come. Bam and Rachel's mystery is slowly taking a back seat as there are far more important and immediately interesting plot threads unwinding. This is why I think this episode did so well utilizing such a big cast, because Bam and Rachel took a back seat. Can we talk about Bam forging his contract? Oh wait, as the giant froggy monster says, his shackle. If this episode and previous episodes didn't scream Naruto enough, this scene did for me. Come on, it's similar to Naruto sorting out his summoning jutsu and forging his contract. I get the same vibe here, but the kicker is this was a minor scene in a greater narrative of the episode, and that's great. Bam without the black march and his nifty headband is an interesting look. Let's not be fooled, this is essentially a training arc as well as an examination arc, and this episode epitomized that very well. We see how Bam is training, and he's training his powers without the need to rely on the overpowered perverted old spirit lady in the black mark. They alluded to this great Shinsu that resides in him, and it's nice to see him trying to get a grasp on that himself, especially all by himself. What's peculiar is how it seems Ho is trying to measure Bam's strength or sabotage it. I don't know, it's a weird. I think Ho's being a bit dodgy. He's trying to go under the guise of friendship, but there's more to it. There's way more to it. This episode focuses on the need and struggle to forging alliances. I guess this is a running theme, but with more obscure motives and other motives coming to light. I'm very curious on how the team and individual dynamics will play out. The final act of this episode was the game atop these elevated platforms where you knock people down until there's 8 left. But pause, wait, no. Actually, rewind. Leading up to this game, it was quite interesting. The episode itself was calm and the dialogue was really heavy. It was an information dump with various scenes montaging to make the most of the dialogue and limited screen time. It drummed up a brewing air of tension. The episode was set in a singular location for the most part. In addition to the task of them needing to make friends, there was a strong sense of camaraderie or budding friendships you see with a group of people who just spend time in an isolated place, similar to how people forge bonds in a boarding school or if you were stranded on an island. However, there was a significant number of people who had ulterior motives. In this episode, it was narrated to the viewers through Khun and Dorsey respectively that everything is not what it seems and people are a little dodgy. The comedy in this episode was driven by Tracksuit Boy, who is becoming more and more endearing episode by episode. When the tension finally boils over, that is exactly when the action truly begins. And again, so much was going on leading up to it. An information dump by Khun, who reminded us we know nothing about Bam or Rachel, and Anak is quite mysterious. So as the action exploded, so did Anak as she ran towards the other princess of Jahad, but she was severely outclassed in combat. Something seemed off, something very peculiar. We kept hearing Dorsey calling Anak a fake, and the reaction by Anak was akin to her being called a slur. Anak kept getting more and more angry as she was getting battered, but the rage again increased exponentially. Is this an appropriate time to say that she was like the She-Hulk except a weak and subdued version? But hey, they're both green. We figured out that Anak is out for revenge against those who wronged her mother. Her mother was a princess of Jahad, and earlier on the episode we learned that the princesses of Jahad are forbidden from they're forbidden from having children or falling in love, essentially, as they are representatives of the great families and essentially just shoes in a shoe case, in a shoe cabin. Anak's mother fell in love and had a child with a famous chef. I don't know why that matters. For her crime, their settlement was burnt to the ground and she was hunted down and killed by her quote-unquote sisters. Anak's mother was murdered by the princesses of Jahad. This made sense. As Khun said earlier on the episode, Anak is a ranker who's already climbed the tower, because most princesses of Jahad are rankers, aren't they? So why is she here? Oh, also, she's already dead. So I guess now we know why. This is the daughter of the dead princess who took her name to swear revenge for her mother's honor. Anak has entered the tower for the sole purpose of slaughtering every princess of Jahad, the first victim being Dorsey. A very packed episode, a very packed exposition-filled episode. It has a lot of trickery that combines to become this drum roll for the action sequence at the end, and a big reveal of Anak's motives. It was a hefty content dump, and again, they pulled this off very well. Another 24-minute episode which felt like it was 11 minutes at best. We come to the final episode of this halfway review, and it was a bit of a weird, dodgy one. I don't know what to make of it completely. It starts off with a very informative narration, aided with diagrams to tell us about the Jahad princess structure, the fact that King Jahad was the first to climb the tower, and the princesses of Jahad are not related by blood, but merely shoes on a showcase. That's been kind of told to us beforehand. They're beautiful to look at, but can never be worn by another. They're forbidden to fall in love or bear any children. This is much needed context though for us as the viewer, as it essentially explains Anak's mother and how she was slaughtered and why she was slaughtered. She broke the sacred rules, as Princess Endorsi reminds us. It cuts back to the fight between the two, which continues the high octane, emotionally motivated drive on Anak's end. The fight between the two ends with a double ring out, which is followed by a sad flashback when Anak last saw her mother. Now let's pause. I don't like this. Yes, sure, the flashback was very touching, informative, and gave us a very comprehensive look into what motivates Anak. In addition, the final POV from Anak's point of view of her mother was very well done. I loved how Anak Jr.'s sound was muted, which enhanced the emotion in the scene to portray the mother's dilemma. It's obvious that she's torn with sadness, but she's putting on a brave face to ensure that her daughter doesn't see her sadness. She was strong for her daughter. She died for her daughter. But that's the good portion. I don't like how it switched from a very serious, tense battle between Endorsi and Anak to a suddenly more comedic and light-hearted interaction between the two. Why? It felt like a huge character moment that was rushed, truncated, and in all honesty wasn't really too well done. It felt like a ton of interaction was just cut out. For me, the rage and the emotion that we felt from Anak was stifled. Like, look, we truly just understood why Anak was so angry, only for her to kind of calm down randomly and not be so filled with rage. It was a little baffling, to say the least. Let me know what you guys think. I don't think I'm alone in this, but I might be a bit stupid, so correct me and tell me why I'm wrong. Thank you. This episode moves on to show Ho is slowly revealing his true colors. As Bam excels in the test, it seems that Ho is very jealous and takes notion of he doesn't like the fact that Laure helped Bam because he's taking rivalry a little too seriously. But it was a nice touch to see that, a nice gesture, since Bam helped Laure with a makeshift pillow after his pillow was soiled. There was a lot of comedy in this actually. Quite a lot. Ho gets a note asking if he wants to climb the tower. Interesting. It seems like someone has taken notice of his lack of abilities and desperation. He would make a perfect pawn, perfect to be manipulated. Who's going to use him? How? I guess, I don't know, who could? I think it's that coffee examiner. He looks so dodgy. The episode then turns to a more light-hearted and comedic flair as it progresses the narrative. Khun's calm and calculated demeanor is perfect. Is a perfect comedic tag team when married with Tracksuit Dude's overzealousness, Hax's pride, and Bam's naiveness. The plan to befriend Endorsi and Anak for the Tracksuit Hax to oh mate, am I saying them wrong? It's just really funny, honestly. Though that whole scene, it was just perfectly done, and again, comedy done right. Although I still don't like how Anak suddenly mellowed down, but it was very, very funny. The next test is a game of tag, and the dodgy politics of the test examiners is given spotlight, perhaps way more to how they operate than meets the eye. In this game of tag, the ranker quant will be it, in quotation marks. As they begin to play the game, the tactics needed to be victorious are showcased. I always love when a good plan almost works out. This test will be a good opportunity to see what most of the characters have learned during this training arc. Also, what is going on with Rachel? Sorry, excuse me, Michelle Light. What does Endorsi truly know, and why is she having apples like Ryuk from Death Note? And that's Rachel, by the way. So, Rachel, why are you having apples? why are you not having chicken or some other food? You're looking a bit dodgy. What's going on? This episode was good, but I still have a sour taste on how they rushed Anak and put her story into the background, because as soon as, she had the double count out, she really was relegated to the background, and I think she should have been given more time to flesh out her emotions and how she deals with them during the battle with Endorsi. Look, perhaps they'll do that later, but this episode did feel like it squeezed so much into one. It actually could have been stretched from 5 minutes, the Anak and Endorsi fight, to at least half an episode or 2/3, 11 to 15 minutes. Come on. Overall, this episode was good, yet very rushed. It further introduced more mystery factors and questions, and that's something which this first half has been quite good at. There seems to be a lot of content. So let's see how they deal with it with the episodes moving forward. Having now watched all 7 episodes for this first half review, here's some points I want to expand on. The theme of luck was reiterated throughout the first 3 episodes, but it's quite obvious there's way more to it than meets the eye. Bam was able to wield the power of the Black March because he's a guy. Well, okay. And one of the reasons to why Princess Yuri allowed him to borrow the weapon is because she likes his face. I think these superficial reasons have some merit, but the reason as to why he was able to unlock the power of the weapon is much deeper. There has to be. The sequence of Bam fighting against the steel eel did very well to build tension, excitement, and foreshadow the quality of the action scenes to come. Look, due to the art style, the animation is very fluid and crisp, which is an anchor for the tone of this series. Everything is fluid, dynamic. Not everything is what it seems. Every little detail seems to play into the story one way or another. This is a massive world that we're exploring, and I don't think we even scratched the surface. We're still in the air. We haven't even landed on the ground. That's what it seems like. There seems to be a very complicated world hidden right in front of our eyes within this supposed simple tower structure. There obviously is a concrete set of rules, and the first 3 episodes have made that abundantly clear. Rules are absolute. However, the rules are not very rigid. The rules are literally what the rule makers make of them. Well, I guess that's just common sense, isn't it? But it seems like politics will really play a part in this series moving forward, as some of the rule makers, some of the examiners don't seem to be looking eye to eye every single time. This implies that the rulers and the governance of this world is probably riddled with bureaucratic and just corruption. It's just bureaucracy, corruption, and a lot of information hidden from the masses. We see this clearly in the episode where not all the rankers are in agreement. There we see a glimpse beforehand, such as a situation with Yuri. Why would the princess need to rebel and risk her life because she's bored? How disconnected are the royals from the rest of the populace? I don't know. More questions appear with the introduction of more characters who each have their own nuance or facade they are trying to maintain. In these initial episodes, I started disliking Bam slightly. Why? Well, he did seem as remarkable as he was being portrayed by other characters, rather than being built up and anticipating for him to do something epic or great. And it just wasn't coming. I'm waiting. It just wasn't coming. And when it did come, it was just too far in between. And maybe because I don't know anything about him, maybe because we don't learn much about him, I can't really invest in him. I don't want to invest in him. Look, though we got a silver lining of what's to come during episode 5 and also in episode 7, I would say, when we saw quite a lot of greatness and epicness, but mainly in episode 5, we just need some more character development from Bam. And I think, you know what, let him understand and meet Rachel properly, and we'll probably get that. The story and other character reactions are clearly trying to tell us something, and we're given quite a few hints along the way. I'm looking forward to seeing all of this build and pay off. I expect great things. He is truly distinguished as something special when the ranker Leroro outright says a monster has entered the tower. Regulars are people who were born and raised inside the tower, whilst the irregulars are chosen from outside the tower. So the question I still have is, why was Bam chosen? Why was Rachel chosen? Who is Rachel? Rachel? Who the hell is Bam? Are the other irregulars still alive? Who are they? Are we gonna meet them? Personally, I would like Bam to meet at least one of them or another irregular, as I feel he sees himself as an outsider and even looks that way from a viewer's perspective. So it would be nice for him to come in contact with a character that's a bit more relatable to him specifically. Bam could use a bit of guidance right now as well, because it seems like he's so easy to manipulate and he's a bit too naive. Look, at the top of the tower exists everything in this world and all of it can be yours. That's what we've been told. You can become omnipotent according to them. Is this the story of Rachel, the girl who climbed the tower so she could see the stars, and Bam, a boy who needed nothing but her? Their end and their beginning. What does that mean? What does that mean? Why did they say their end and then their beginning? Why that order? Bam seems unfazed by everything around him, and he has a very singular way of living life, and it's just for Rachel, which is both aggravating yet interesting. His fear and other emotions are not crippling. They're not crippling him. It's not a crippling factor for him or stifling him, as they are overpowered by his desire and determination to again live for Rachel. I hope that he eventually finds a more personal goal for climbing the tower. It'd be significant growth in my opinion, as he moves from chasing after Rachel, and would create a far more interesting story if he were to actually have another reason to chase after, or have an actual brain or motivation that stems from his own self. All in all, Bam is seemingly simple yet complicated of a character, and more than anything, he's a breath of fresh air. It's a change from the usual main characters that we know. Bam does seem to reflect the same brash, headstrong qualities every main character seems to display in shonen, but without coming off as stupid. Wait, is this even a shonen? I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Apologies if I am. His only derailing factor is his reason to live, which is for Rachel. Maybe I'll change my mind as I learn more about him as we progress the series. I want him to forge his own path, and that's what's really driving me to invest in him. And maybe that's what they exactly want. They want me to focus on Bam and get frustrated with him and be his own person. Look, anyway, before I conclude, I just want to leave you lot with a few questions which I had that's been bugging me. So if you guys can help answer this, let me know. Are Bam and Rachel from another world? Are they from this world? Why does Bam have no memories? Head-on is dodgy. Isn't he the one who pretty much made Princess Yuri give Bam the blade? I don't know, I don't trust him. They said not even people on the 20th floor can easily do the breaking of the ball challenge around the steel eel test. Why is Bam getting such a different test from Head-on? Why him? And if he can do a test that is, from what they say, a 20th level difficulty, why is he struggling as much in these early stages? Or maybe he's still learning. Is he going to breeze through the first 20 levels as he was able to defeat the steel eel? That high quality pocket is too good for you. That's what Princess Yuri says to Bam upon meeting him. Why does Bam get a high quality one? How do we determine what is high quality? What's a low quality pocket? As we know, Tower of God is originally South Korean piece. It's a manhwa, and it was developed into an anime by Crunchyroll. This is a webcomic, and from what we know, there are other webcomics of similar quality. So do you guys think that the other studios, perhaps Japanese studios, will follow this trend and adopt webcomics? And how good is God of High School? If it's anything as good as Tower of God, I'll be looking forward to it. You guys should really let me know if you are aware of that. But I do hope this wasn't too long, too stretched out. Apologies if it was. Let me know if you want to see more Tower of God content. And with that being said, like, share, comment, subscribe. Take care. Stay safe.